One of the last major Native American civilizations, the Aztecs, were a nomadic, wandering group from northern Mexico. Like many other cultures in history, farming has been the biggest sustenance for survival. But the Aztec methods and techniques were truly remarkable. Let us explore how the Aztecs farmed and farming in history. The land. According to mythology, the sun god appeared to the Aztec one day and spoke to them. The god advised the Aztecs to search for a sign in the form of an eagle sitting on a cactus with a serpent in its beak. The Aztec were to build a new and powerful empire in this place. Tenochtitlan was then created on the marshy lands of Lake Texcoco, meaning place of the cactus fruit. Here they developed agriculture and agricultural techniques to suit the environment. The Aztec had built their kingdom around the Valley of Mexico in 1325 AD. The city of Tenochtitlan grew and eventually reached a population of 200,000 people alone. It's said to have accumulated to 11 million throughout the empire. The Aztec terraced the hills that surrounded the valley by cutting through them in order to use the mountainous ground for cultivation. They then constructed a retaining wall to build a step in the slope, allowing them to cultivate the ground on the step. A second city was also founded 13 years after the creation of Tenochtitlan, just a few hundred meters to the north. Eventually, the two islands combined but kept their separate governments and identities. The other island had a large temple and farming markets, and Tenochtitlan obtained a bigger population. The construction. The Aztec perfected a specific form of artificial farming practice called Chinampa, also known as floating gardens. Chinampa means in the fence of reeds, which is very specific to the design. Aztec farming and agriculture grew as a result of this strategy in places that could not be farmed otherwise due to their marshy conditions. The Aztec used this style of farming by cultivating crops on small rectangular plots of land in the Mexico Valley's shallow lake bottoms. The quantity of water on these man-made islands provided an advantage, as did the climate, which was favorable to agriculture. Chinampas and other forms of Aztec agriculture actually come from the days before the Aztec Empire. Chinampas farming was begun in Xochimilco and Chalco, and was probably quickly adapted by the Aztecs as these people became part of the empire. Aztec farming encompasses thousands of years of farming expertise. The size of these artificial areas for Aztec cultivation and agriculture was generally 30 meters by 2.5 meters. There were, however, bigger chinampas, some of which were as enormous as 91 meters in length and 4.6 meters high. At Tenochtitlan, the Aztec fashioned gigantic reed mats that they floated in the shallows with the borders made of braided twigs and branches tied to stakes in the land bed. They spread soil from the lake's bottom, decomposing plants and dirt from neighboring places on the mats. Aztec farmers raised the soil to the level of the lake's surface. They planted fast-growing willow trees at the plot's corners in order to use the plant's roots to anchor the chinampa to the lake's bottom. The planting area within the chinampa was filled with sediment, and a canal provided access for canoes between each allotment. A combination of natural springs and artificial structures such as aqueducts, dams, canals, and gates provided and carefully managed the water. The science of constructing these unique land masses was never written down in the culture's unique hieroglyphs or learned in schools. Rather, information has been passed down verbally from generation to generation, even today. The crops. The Aztec cultivated a wide range of crops and cereals. Maize, beans, and squash were among the most significant crops farmed by Aztec farmers. In Aztec civilization, maize was the most important crop and a vital element of their nutrition. Tortillas and empanadas were two of the main foods created from maize in the Aztec culture. Maize is still an important crop today, having spread throughout the world and being utilized in a variety of foods. They learned very quickly that when corn, beans, and squash are plants that are cultivated together, especially in their moist environment, they help each other to grow in abundance. This is called the Three Sisters. Corn, for example, draws nitrogen from the soil and replaces it with beans. Corn stalks give the strong support that bean plants require to flourish. Squash leaves provide shade to the earth, keeping moisture in and weeds out. The Aztec also cultivated chilies, tomatoes, peanuts, and a variety of flowers. White sweet potatoes, jicama, chayote, and the nopal cactus were cultivated, though they were much smaller than modern varieties. Guavas, papayas, custard apples, mamey, zapotes, and chirimoyas were among the fruits grown by the Aztecs. Popcorn and delicious baked maguey agave leaves were among the snacks. They also harvested algae from Lake Texcoco's surface and utilized the high protein high-protein algae to produce breads and cheese-like meals. This algae is known today as spirulina. The Aztecs could also capture fish, frogs, turtles, and birds, like ducks and geese, along the Chinampas. Can you imagine just what a beautiful and colorful place this valley would have been? Cotton and tobacco, which were smoked in pipes or rolled into cigars, were among the non-food crops grown. Goods were sold at markets held in the central plazas of all towns once they were harvested. The most well-known and largest was the market at Tlatelolco, which drew 25,000 visitors each day, with more to 50,000 attending the special market held every fifth day. The society. Aztec farmers could be permanent tenants on vast, privately held estates, or land could be owned by communities and parceled out to individual families for cultivation. The proprietors, who were either Aztec nobility, warriors granted the property as a prize for services provided, or the monarch himself, all received rent in kind and governed their estates through intermediary administrators. On a lesser scale, it was also usual for commoners to have their own garden plot that could provide food for their families. Slaves were at the bottom of the social ladder and, in addition to working in other industries, were heavily involved in agriculture. There were two types of agricultural workers: basic farm laborers who tended the fields, planted and watered crops, and more specialized horticulturalists who knew about seeding, transplanting, crop rotation, and the ideal times to plant and harvest crops. The latter information might be gleaned from Tonolamatl almanacs, which took into account not only climate conditions but also favorable times and events for planting and harvesting. Horticulturists would be in charge of determining which seeds were the best, how crop rotation should be implemented, and what would grow best on which types of terrain. Fertilization and irrigation were also vital, and human manure was frequently used to fertilize the land. The tools. The Aztec culture had access to a wide range of resources that aided in the creation of implements. Obsidian, copper, andesite, flint, wood, sidian, and chert were among the materials they frequently created and used for their farming. For the Aztecs, there was no more basic down-to-earth piece of equipment than the modest digging stick. These digging sticks came in a variety of shapes and sizes, and they were frequently employed for tasks other than farming, such as building and repairs. The gardens. Creating and developing a garden was a highly respected pastime for the Aztec elite, and it was made possible by the Aztec state's accumulated wealth. It was highly organized, with teams of professional gardeners who linked their expert knowledge of plants to the sacred calendar. All this was made possible by the Aztec state's accumulated wealth. The majority of Aztec upper-class homes had their own pleasure gardens, which included water features, orchards, trees of medicinal value, and herb gardens. The chocolate. Vanilla and chocolate were two of the Aztecs' favorite flavors. The name chocolate is derived from the Nahul Aztec word chocolate. Chocolate was made from the beans of cacao pods from a tree that was widely grown in orchards near the coast. Fermented, cured, and roasted beans were used. The beans were then pounded into a powder and combined with hot water, as chocolate was traditionally served as a warm, frothy beverage. Bitter in flavor, it can be flavored with corn, vanilla, flowers, herbs, and honey, among other things. They drank chocolate as a pleasant beverage, an aphrodisiac, even to prepare for war, believing it was a gift from the god Quetzalcoatl. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Aztec land in 1519, they saw that the Aztec monarch Montezuma II and other elites drank chocolate. Spices and corn were added to the chocolate drink every day. Moctezuma II was believed to drink dozens of cups of it. Cocoa beans were used as currency by the Aztecs by the 15th century. Aztec farming today, after the conquest, most of the Chinampas were abandoned and filled in, and they were no longer utilized. The Chinampas covered about 9,000 hectares when the Spanish came. Some, however, are still in use today. The canal system's remnants can be observed in Xomilco. If you take the time, you can still go see the Chinampas today. The Aztecs were known for their agricultural achievements, which included farming all accessible land, establishing irrigation, clearing marshes, and constructing artificial islands in lakes. What a strong and intelligent civilization. Thank you for watching.